Hey, Rich. I am
Hey,
super excited about today's conversation. This is a
awesome.
guest that I got to bring in, and I was fortunate to meet her. Our daughters go to college together, and we started talking about what we do in the day job and just had really terrific conversations. So I'm excited to
Awesome.
share this. So today's conversation is really about something that a lot of leaders say that they value, but few actually live out, which is reinvention. The reality is the world is changing whether you're ready or not, and it's not waiting for your permission. And Kelly's going to tell us that exactly, which I'm super excited about. So our guest today is Kelly Bianchi, and she has lived that reinvention firsthand. She has built businesses from scratch. She has scaled them. She has exited and she has worked in a lot of different industries. And I think you're going to really enjoy her experiences. But it's that journey, that nonlinear journey that she's taken that really has shaped how she thinks about transformation today. So we're going to get into, what founders understand that enterprises miss. And I think you'd be really interested to hear her perspective and
Sounds
how much it aligns with what we see in larger businesses on a regular basis. So let's get to it.
awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
One, two, three, four.
Thank you.
Kelly, we are so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the
Yeah,
invite.
absolutely. I'm excited about this because I think that you've got a little bit different background than a lot of our guests, and I'm excited to get into your experience as you really, were unpacking your background. It was really good to get an operator and an entrepreneur point of view, whereas a lot of us just come into businesses not having that experience. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to the point where you are in this in this transformation role, but coming in from having lived the transformation yourself.
Well, started out, in the beginning, I was going to be a police officer, believe it or not. And I took a little turn that kind of led me into the road of entrepreneurship. And so it was almost by accident. And I started a card business and I raised over $100,000 to start a business. And it basically became $100,000 lesson on how to run a business. From there, I went into the restaurant industry and I had a restaurant for 5 years. And then I ended up in the auction business by way of the restaurant business. And I'm talking about auto auctions. And so, in every phase of that journey, what I learned was that I love the foundation and how businesses are created. And that just became an obsession for me. So the transition aspect of it and how businesses evolve, that was just something I completely embraced. And it was a challenge that I accepted in every area that I was in, especially the technology component and how, the world was evolving with technology at that time and how you could apply technology in businesses that weren't really driven by technology. So I was able to take that with me all the way to where I am now, which is I had just sold my business last year, a business I started as a result of being in the auction business. I ended up on the technology side of it, and we offered a product to our customers that I didn't feel we were servicing well enough. And from there, I decided, I wanted to help our customers become more entrepreneurial about going into the technology space. And
Right.
I felt we were just doing a very poor job we were just showing them how to push buttons, and I just really that bothered me, so here I
Yeah, I
am.
mean, so in that transition, was your focus really about helping these people in the auction space learn about technology? Were they just not really tech savvy?
Yeah, when I started working at the auction, I thought it was funny that, we had this technology and we were doing things operationally that seemed like big workarounds that the technology could solve. But what I noticed about the people of the auction industry was that they're very rooted. It's a multi-generational business. Everybody's very rooted in the way things are always done. We hear that all the time in this
Right.
space. That's the way we've always done it. Well, you hear it a lot. If it's not broke, don't fix it,
Right.
all those cliche phrases. And the mindset was that, this is not something you do. This is a relationship business. That was one of the
Mm,
biggest. It's a relationship business. It's a people business. We have to shake hands, kick tires. And there were
right.
just all these phrases that, really kind of made technology an unwelcome guest. And the only reason that the auctions were actually taking on the technology was because their customers were telling them that in order to get our inventory, to get our vehicles, you have to have this technology product.
Right.
And that was the company that I worked for. So, me as an entrepreneur and having worked in the auction space and now being with the technology company, I felt like it was a missed opportunity that they weren't embracing this because they had the wrong idea on what it could do for their business. They thought it was replacing the people that were in the lanes and telling them to go online. And
Mm,
for me, it was a whole different audience that couldn't get up and go to the auction because they were
right.
another state away. So,
Right.
I was like, how do we get that message across and how do we train the auctions better? I don't want to come in here anymore and just show them, here's where this button is, here's where have fun with that. See you later. So I
But it's interesting point because, ours is a little different on the technology side. We kind of grew up using technology and helping customers implement technology. But it's funny as you say, kind of people were fearful that it takes them off the line and it takes that human element away. It's the same in every industry. So it's interesting to hear you kind of echo that same sentiment is technology feels scary no matter what when people don't understand it.
Yes, and that's the psychological aspect of it, right? Is that and that's what you have to get into when you're doing the transformation is what are the stoppers? What's keeping people from wanting to transform? And there's the vulnerability of change, right? It's like
Yes.
the minute I stop doing what I've been doing every day, I become less valuable to the company because in that space, I'm kind of an idiot, and that was one of the big things where I realized that if I put myself in my customer's shoes and I talked to them and laid it out for them in the way they needed to understand it, one of the biggest things that people would say to me is, "I just love that you don't make me feel like I'm stupid when you're explaining this to me."
Right.
Yeah, and the funny part is, like, I'm not a developer, I'm a citizen developer. I looked at this from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So I had a different way of embracing technology. And so where they're coming from is, just a whole different point of view that makes it feel like it's something forced. It's something that's, it's just going to make them not understand the job that they were an
Right.
expert in at one point.
And
So.
this kind of technology theme, you said you're an restaurateur.
Mhm.
So did that same technology theme follow you through that journey as well?
What's funny is that was kind of by accident that I stumbled across the benefits of technology in that space. It was yeah, it was like a whole year because back then the big thing was SEO, right? And I was in
Right.
this little business district and our customers were offices and everything nearby, and you had to close at 5 because everybody went home. And so I'm like, "Well, I can't increase hours." You're limited on what you could do. The space had a very high turnover rate. Nobody lasted for more than a year, and they always sold, like, cold sandwiches and salads and things like that. So, I had to do that part different. We had to get a grill in there. We had to, so change it up that way. But on the other side of it, I was still the lesser known restaurant in the area. So if
Right.
anybody was calling for lunch, they're calling Lorraine's Lunchbox that's been around for 30 years, and I had been around for, matter of months. And so how do I differentiate myself? And I didn't know really how I could do that. But as a hungry entrepreneur, every night I went home and I got on every list online that I could possibly get on that anybody would search for. And just by doing that, it was pushing us to the top of the,
The SEO.
search engines.
Yeah.
And so now, fast forward a couple years into it, and next thing you know, I had hoarders reaching out to me because they were doing a show in town and they needed craft services and all these things. And so I had another movie in town. I had, any business person that was coming into town to present things, the salespeople that come in and they book the lunch and they do all that. Well, they didn't know me from other restaurants. They knew that I was
Right.
on the top of the list. And so we got all that business and I tripled the business because of that strategy.
There was a story I just listened to on social media. It was this woman who had a rough life and then wound up going back to her hometown in Maine. And these people had renovated this restaurant and she was a chef. So she started, um, creating a following. But then the town was so dire that the postal service was gonna the post office was gonna close down. So she said, "In order to get a reservation at my restaurant, you need to send us a postcard." The first year, she got 60,000 postcards to keep
Away.
the post office open, and now it's one of, like, the hardest restaurants to get into, and it's in, I wanna say Freedom, Maine. Never heard of Freedom, Maine. Know Maine pretty well. And, yeah, and she sources everything locally, but, kind of it's not technology, but it's interesting how entrepreneurs, kind of to your story, use the levers that they have creatively to manage their businesses or grow their businesses, which is
you
a
know,
different mindset, you know?
Yeah, and it's funny because people credit me for my knowledge in technology, but I'm like, that's not really even the main skill. The main skill is about being resourceful. Because as an entrepreneur, that's all you're doing, right? Is you're looking for ways to do a better business, to create a better to build these pieces and put them together. And that's the puzzle for me. The technology was just a tool that I was able to use to help accelerate some of the initiatives that I was doing, and then it turned into the entire business. So I just found a niche in an area where, well, lucky for me, it's in an industry that kind of rejects technology as a main source for their business. And I'm gonna clean that up a little bit just because of the fact that when I started, it was 15 years ago. After COVID, that was kind of a game changer. Everybody, because the whole thing was, you know, you can't sell cars online. Our customers don't they'll never do this, or they would always tell me, "This is our and so when COVID came, it was like you couldn't even have a sale in person because that was the state mandate.
Right.
So it was like, "Well, how are we gonna do it?" So everybody was calling me, and I was like, "Well, sorry, it's gonna I can't just onboard you overnight. That's a
Right.
process." So it was funny how that worked out. But I noticed, like, those are kind of the danger words too. It's when you
Right.
hear somebody say, "My customers will never do that," or, they technology turns a customer type into a multidimensional customer. And that's one of the things that I had to explain to the customers was that, the world doesn't need your permission to change, first of all. Your customers are actually exposed to Amazon and all these different devices. I walk into a Panera and I see people above 70 years old using the self-help thing, getting their order in and doing all that. So there's no constraints on age, all these things that people have determined that their customers won't do or what their customer type is. It's been blown away, those stereotypes, by the fact that people are using it in different areas and then they're coming back to these businesses that are refusing to change.
Right.
In the auction business too, I mean, you just look out from the block, where all of the audience is, and they all have a mobile phone in their hand. And right there, that's just proof positive. So
Love that. I'm wondering, you've probably learned some tricks of the trades. Are you still running into people who are fearful of the technology, or are we over that now? And now they're like, "Oh, I'm behind. I need to catch up."
I think right now, while I'm in a good position because it's coming from leadership. And I'm glad you said that because from the beginning, one of the things about the auction industry, I was working with multiple independent auctions. Last year, I was bought out by an auction group. So, in my view, leadership was the key. It was, you know, and you can have individual leaders in positions at these auctions who embrace it and say, "Hey, I think this is a good idea and I'll do what it takes." Or you'll have another type of person who says, "Well, nobody told me I had to do that, so I'm not going to do that." So it's like you have to identify that person, that leader, because whether they say something is going to be successful or something is going to fail, they're going to be 100% right. Because my thing is, if you're the one in charge of the outcome, then whatever you determine right now is what's going to happen. But I know myself in implementing this that success is 100% attainable, but it's mindset. So you have to get the leadership mindset. So it all depends on who you put in charge of that project to be able to relay that to everyone, to get the buy-in, and to get rid of all the stigmas that prevent the company as an organization from going forward with everything. Especially that onboarding process. They look at that like it's this huge mountain to climb. And it's because, hey, if I'm used to doing something every day and you could put a blindfold on me and I could still do it, well, who wants to change that, right? But it could be the harder thing,
Right.
right? It's like, what if we looked at it retroactively? What if we turned around, like, have you ever introduced your kids to a rotary dial phone? Because that worked perfectly fine, right? Those were
Right.
great. We
Right.
Right.
didn't
And they're
mind
like,
those.
this takes so long and I have to remember a number, like, or I have to write it down. Like, oh my gosh. A phone book? What was
Just the
that for?
memory of numbers alone, I didn't even think of that when I said it, but yeah.
Right.
It's true. And it
So we
doesn't
were
matter
perfect.
what size of business you're in, because I think that's something that Rich and I see every single time. There
Right.
is a big success quotient that goes to, do you have the right leadership that is very, very clear about, here is where we're going, here is why we're doing it, here's what's going to happen. And then also understanding that it is going to be a journey. It is not going to be, particularly when you're working with technology, we are going to get done the first time and we're going to say, huh, yeah, yeah, we want to change that. And that's perfectly fine, but you still need the leadership to reinforce that this is the future direction that we are going.
Yeah.
And are going to accept that. We're going to accept the blood, sweat, and tears, and the tears that come the first time you try that rotary phone equivalent. There will be tears, and we're still going to head that
Right.
direction. Huge success
Right.
indicator.
Well, and
Yes.
it's nice to see that theme cross industries again, because I think a lot of times, Kelly's, if you see this, is a lot of times people get so enamored with the technology that they forget about the change. They forget about the leadership. They forget about the people part of the technology. And what we always remind people of is what we call day two, right? Day one is you launch the technology and it either works or it doesn't work, or people adopt it or they don't adopt it. But day two is about operationalizing your business. It's about making that technology work with your processes and your customers and your employees and your partners. And there isn't enough time spent with people on day two and beyond, because they're like, oh, we gotta get this technology out. It's gonna do this and it's gonna do this and it's gonna do that. And then it happens and they're like, well, no one's using it. Yeah, because you didn't spend any time on change management.
You didn't teach them how to use it.
Or you kept the other thing you were doing going while you were doing this. So you just allowed everybody to revert back to what they were doing and
Yeah.
you're blaming it on the technology. I found the most success that our customers have gotten with it is when they structure the process themselves and how they're rolling it out. So they're more invested in that process. And normally what motivates them to do that is because the hardships that they've had with the old process was enough of a motivation. So they don't even adopt it all across the board in all of their departments. But let's say they have a department that's really losing money, or there's a lot of frustration with customers or whatever, and in particular, I'm talking about arbitration is an area of focus from one of the auctions that I saw had the biggest level of success because they put together a game plan. They got the buy-in from everybody. They told everybody no. They just put their foot down and they said, you're going to do this process because this is our main process. We no longer take arbitrations over the phone. They're no longer filling out. They took away all of the other avenues and they said, this is the path. And then when everybody started following the path, then they got the results. If they would not have, so the alternative of that where other businesses have failed in doing this is they let them continue to make the phone calls, send the emails so to them it was another thing. And I'm like,
Right.
well, yeah, it would feel like another thing because you've just made it another thing. It should be the only thing, because what I can guarantee you is that if this is the only thing, you have less things falling through cracks that cost money in the long run. You have centralized communication and information. So your sales guy can go on vacation if he wants, or the operations person can go on vacation if they want, because you are not single person dependent anymore. Because every time somebody leaves, on the technology side of it, when I worked for the vendor, the minute somebody called in because there was a problem, I'd say, okay, who's absent today? And they're like, well, so and so usually does this. And I'm like, uh-huh. So you've taught one person how to do this, and now they're on vacation. So it's the training aspect. It's embracing it as an organization and not just, overcomplicating it, because that's the other side of it too, is when you overcomplicate it or you feel intimidated by it, you're a mirror to everybody else. So if your
Right.
leader feels like this is overwhelming, you're supposed to go train other people and tell them it's easy peasy. That's not going to happen. You're going to reflect whatever you feel onto everybody else, and you're never going to get this across.
I love it. I'm wondering if you guys are seeing the effects in your business of AI. How is that starting to press in? Because now you've got people who are used to a system, a single process, but we're looking at a whole new transformation. What are the effects that you're
Yeah, I
seeing?
know that I've completely embraced AI. I always say that ChatGPT is like my assistant. Like, it's basically my best friend at this point.
Hmm.
You know, you're it's always open, and it's always, and also the technologies that I use, they're always introducing, because all of our stuff is subscription based tools,
Right.
and
Right.
like I said, I'm a citizen developer, so I use technologies, and I always read up. I love when there's new releases and things, and like, it's, oh, what else can we do with this? And so AI has probably been across the board one of the biggest things. But here's my thing. I wait because our solutions, it's hard enough to pass technology off to an organization that you haven't really vetted yourself. So we try to use that stuff internally. And then once we become comfortable with the behaviors and we can speak to it, because otherwise I never want to be caught off guard. I'm supposed to be the expert in my field, in what we're doing. So that's the hard part about, advancing something that's brand new.
Right.
But once you get your head wrapped around with it and you're using it and everything like that, then, I find the ways that we apply it, and, we implement it into our systems. So,
And have you found, you talk a little bit about the resistance of technology from this group. Have you found AI is throwing even another loop or cog into the wheel, saying, listen, you got me to adopt this, but I'm not, I know AI is definitely going to take my job, right? Because that's what everyone thinks. Have you gotten like a new, you know, round of rebellion, I guess, to technology?
no, in fact, we are working, because I have the leadership involvement at a greater scale, because I'm with a group now, an auction group. So all of those individual auctions, there's a regional manager, there's this hierarchy, and it starts coming from the top, and everybody that I'm working with they see the world changing, and they know that
Yeah.
it's inevitable, and they saw our product as a solution to help advance in a unified way moving forward. So that was already, the leadership aspect of it was in place. And so now it's like, okay, how do we get everybody trained up? What's our starting point? What's going to benefit them the most? One thing in the advantages and why this company was interested in my company is because one of the things that I did from the beginning was go in and learn everybody's job basically before I started building. And so I find that no matter what tool you're using for technology, whether it's AI or you're just building databases and doing that kind of stuff, I want to learn their lingo, and then I want to be able to translate that into exactly what they're talking about. So when I walk them through something, a process, I can say, okay, so remember how you used to start by doing this? Now you're gonna, and they're like, oh, okay,
Right.
so you do know what I do. So I get those kind of reactions like, I'm not somebody who's so distanced from their business and understanding them. And I think that's, people are standoffish. When they think
Right.
you're cooking in here and you're trying to show them something, you don't know their business. You don't know, very
Well,
defensive.
and we talk a lot. We've talked a lot with people on the podcast about empathy, right? And I always say, listen, when I was younger and I was a consultant, I just get it done. I don't want to hear you bitching and moaning. Like it's like the client's paying us. Like just do the project, right? And maybe it's age or sophistication, but when you lead with the empathy, when you sit and you understand what people do and you can mirror it, I think to your point, you get the buy-in. You get okay, so you're not a consultant who's coming in and telling me how to do my job. You're actually understanding and relating to me. So now I'll come along with you for the ride. And I think that's a missing element in transformations. I don't think people spend enough time on the process pieces and discussion around, well, what happens when this changes? And a couple of clients we're working with, we're doing the same thing. We've talked a lot about the technology, but we keep on saying, well, what does the process look like? What does the people side of this look like? Because you probably can get 50% of your problem solved by solving those things before
Yeah.
you even start implementing the technology. And by the way, if you address those things, would the technology look different? Probably.
Yeah, and when I go in, I mean, one of the first things because, especially if you are upsetting a whole paper-based system, right? And a lot
Right.
of holes are dropped in those paper-based systems, especially when you're dealing with three-part carbonless reverse, and this one has to go to this department, this has to go to this department, and now they're floating around somewhere. And one company that I was working with had a lot of money spent on double ordering for the same part, and I don't even wanna tell you the amount in a year's time,
Right.
but it's because, you've got these, 3 parts floating around the business, and the thing is, like, the minute you can get rid of those so that's the first thing I do when I come in, I'm like, "Show me your paperwork. I wanna see everything you do on paper right now." And then I start saying, "Okay, we need to take this and we need to put this all in here. And by the way, you already know if you fill this out up here that this box needs to be checked down here. So I can remove some of these steps. This is, you can
Right.
start showing the benefits of,
Right.
right now you're doing this and you're going to hand this to somebody. And then, if somebody calls in and says, "Hey, I filled out a form." Now the person at the front desk is calling back to that department. The person in that department is like, "Well, wait a minute. I think I sent it over to billing." So now billing's trying to transfer over here. Now you're in this chain of calls. And so this was one of the biggest things that I kept hearing was we're another system because now everybody's overwrought with all these systems, right? That because you have a system for everything you're doing. And
Right.
so they're like, "Well, that's just another system that we have to log into and this and that." And I'm like, "Well, when you pick up your phone, that's a system. Okay. I'm replacing that. And in fact, I'm taking your phone, your email, your cell phone and your desk phone, by the way, your email, your text messaging, all these different channels of communication that you use, and I'm putting them into one place so that, like I said earlier, there's people who can't take the day off without getting a whole bunch of phone calls because that information's on their phone or in their email or on a voicemail, so there's all these different reasons, all the pushback that I get, people just have misconceptions that really they need a better understanding. So my goal has always been, how can I put this in a way that's going to hit them? Where
Right.
where they really are going to feel it. And a lot of times that's, "Hey, you want to go on a vacation without any interruptions?" You say that to
Yeah.
Nice. I
That's
love that
funny.
because that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I'm wondering, we always talk about, okay, what's the outcome? And I think going on vacation is a really great outcome, but scaling is another outcome of getting everything into a system. I'm wondering, tell us how your customers have been able to really scale up their operations as a result of these changes.
Yeah, so with these changes and with, by the way, having another company involved that's a lot bigger and having, that leverage, we've been able to get different integrations and things. So, um, one aspect I think of technology that a lot of people do not realize is that self-help aspect. So right now, when you're a business that goes from, you know, you're the person at the front desk and you're taking all the calls, you're taking all the walk-ins, you're doing, everybody's coming to you and you're basically the person who has to still pass them back because you're the first stop, but you're not the last. So think of that from a customer perspective. It's like, especially a customer who's so used to now in every other area of their life, seeing technology kind of skirt them through to the front line. People don't want to know anything about lines anymore, all
Right.
of those physical inconveniences, right? So the way technology helps you to scale is you got that one person at the front desk who now I say is bottlenecks the process because if you have an app, you've got, let's say there's 20 people at that desk. If they take out that app and they can get to that department or even further, I am trying to get there so that I can see what's going on with my vehicle or something like that. Well, now I've got an app. I didn't have to even talk to anybody at the
Right.
desk. And hey, you know what? It's after 5, the auction's closed. I'm in my bed, it's midnight, let's say, and I'm able to conduct business with this business while they're not even open. And that's one of the biggest advantages because when you come in on Monday morning, if you had no technology, you didn't have self-service options for your customers or any portals or anything like that, you're coming into a workload. Now you need more people to accommodate that. And when your customers grossly outnumber you, especially on sale day, because on sale day, they hire extra people to come in on sale day and all this stuff, you can supplement that with technology. I strongly believe that you need technology powered by people in the auction business right now because there is a cross between people who really feel like you have to be there and then there's the people who will strictly go online and then you have the people that are in the middle. They may use it to do their research and look up your vehicles and this and that, but they're coming to the sale tomorrow because they're not going to buy online. So you
Right.
have a few different demographics, but you have to let the customer determine what kind of customer they want to be. You can't determine for them. No, you have to come to the sale. We're going to hide everything from you. You need to come to the sale and that's where we'll talk to you.
Yeah,
So
but
that
that's a interesting point, which I think a lot of people don't take into consideration, right? And when they think about their business, and listening to you talk, it seems like no matter what industry you've been in, one, it sounds like you put the customer at the center. But then you're telling a very elegant story about weaving technology in, right? And not a technology first approach, which it's a very elegant way to tell the story, right? And I think it's very interesting how so many people see this as two kind of different things, right? Like customer experience and customer success kind of sit over with this touchy feely, like, okay, whatever. We used to have a sales leader at Dell, and he's like, when we're implementing CRM, and he's like, no, no, no. Sales is an art. It's not a science. I don't need all this data. I need to touch the person and hold the person's hand and look them in the eye, and I know I'm going to get that sale. We're like, okay, but we need about 100,000 of those sales. So how are you going to touch 100,000 people? So it's interesting how you keep on coming back to yes, the technology is there, but it's powered by these people. Like there's people's knowledge and these people's understanding of the business and willingness to shake people's hands and talk about the business. It's a really nice way to kind of frame it all.
well, early on, one of the things people used to say is, well, you can't build relationships online. And I'm like, have you not seen Match.com? I beg to differ. I don't think you're really understanding how personal technology can get. And now, I mean, it's its own language, it's its own universe. And a lot of us are straddling both universe. I've got one foot completely in technology. I can speak that language and then come over here in the brick and mortar side and I can fully engage at that level as well. So
Right.
and most people are crossing those barriers. I mean, look at the people in your life. And I always start from that because here you got your kids who my daughter has a right hand in a cell phone. She no longer has a left hand. I'm like, can you help me carry these bags? I can. I only got one hand. Put down the phone. And then you have the older people. And, I have my mom telling me all the time, and she's in her 70s and she's like, look what I bought on TikTok. I'm like, TikTok, huh?
Right.
So, like I said before, there's no age limit. It's when you start projecting your fears onto your customers, if you're in business to make money and you want to grow and you were talking scalability and all that stuff, you have to give your customers and your people that you work with some credit
Right.
that they can adopt and overcome. I mean, I hate every new iPhone update that comes in. I hate it and then I love it.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
Because it's a change and I was just used to the search bar being on the bottom or whatever it is. But the thing is that ultimately I know I'm going to be okay with it because
Right.
and that's what Apple does. They continue to change and grow. My Chrome tells me every day there's another Chrome update because they're still adding features. Technology is so fluid, it's going to keep changing. But when you embrace the core of it and the functionality of what it does. I mean, like I said, try putting a rotary in somebody and say, okay, do you want something simple? Here you go. I can't imagine one person, and I don't care what age, that would want that at this point. We know too much.
Well, it's funny. Have you ever seen those videos where they're like, they'll have, a person our age and then a young kid, and they'll be like, answer the phone. And we go like this and they go like this,
Yeah.
right? Because they're doing it on their cell phone and we're picking up that receiver still, right?
Yeah.
So it's things like that are so it's funny generationally how these things change. And we're all in technology, right? But your kind of technology basis is formed by how you were introduced to it all, right? And there's always these things like our kids will never know a world with like Betamax or going to Blockbuster or things like
Or the
that, which
sound of AOL dial up.
right. Right,
Exactly.
right. My daughter saw a Little House on the Prairie, and she goes, "Oh, that's that how like life was for you all?" And we're like, "No, that was like 1800s. How old do you think
My
we
favorite
are?"
show growing up.
Yes, a horse picked me up to go to school.
I love it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like I said earlier, when you retroactively look at how far we've come, there's always people think I don't know how it is they think, but we didn't just get there. We had to take these steps, and technology has accelerated,
Yes,
our advancements greatly. But if you don't embrace it, disruption took out Blockbuster. Disruption has taken out a lot of companies that didn't think that they were even touchable.
right,
So self disruption, I feel like not the antidote because it's not after the fact, but it's the cure for disruption. You have to go in and you have to say, where are we vulnerable? When it comes to technology, how can we be faster? How can we serve more people? How can we, turn two steps into one step? And it's not about getting rid of people because not for anything, there's a lot of areas in that technology. Technology has to be monitored.
right.
Technology, there's all these other different jobs that people can do. I feel like if you lose a job to technology, it's because you lost that job before technology was probably the motivator to get you out of
Right,
that. So be
right.
good at what you do because there's going to be a use for you with that technology. You'll be the leader who drives the technology into your department, and that's how I see people's
So
roles.
when you talk about leadership, because we talked about that a little at the beginning of the call, and so you think about leaders like Steve Jobs, just a visionary, right? Like the story is they built the iPad before they built the phone, and he's like, you can touch your finger and you can use this. And if you remember, you always see the videos pop up on Instagram or whatever, as when he introduced the iPhone, he's like, and we're not going to have a stylus, we're going to have what you have on your fingers. And you think as he's like now looking back, you're like, holy crap, he sat in a room with people and said, yeah, I'm going to put everybody on this little device and they're going to use their finger to do everything. There's going to be no keyboard. And when you think about back then, that's like, what are you talking about? No keyboard. My finger is going to
Yeah.
do this, right? And now we wouldn't know any other way to live, right? And you wonder, well, how are they going to change that? Like, what is the next thing that we have no idea? So when you talk about leadership and you've talked about aligning leadership, like, do you gravitate to the people who are visionaries? Do you try to bring the vision to them? Like, how does that all work? Because, you've talked about some people just kind of being stuck in their ways and they're
Well, some
not
people
visionaries.
are a gauge, right? And so you have this person at this end of the spectrum and this person at this end of the
Yeah.
spectrum, and you're like, "I have to satisfy both ends of the spectrum." So you hold on to those people because one thing that I've learned is that, and even for myself, a big takeaway for myself was always that knowledge is limiting,
Mm,
because knowledge gets in the way of growth. When you think you've learned everything you need to know, just like those people with Steve Jobs and he's showing them the phone,
right.
like, how are you ever going to do that? Or, hey, the internet's never going to take off. Think of those people who say things like that, who are regretting it bad now, but there's always those people. Those are the words to me that indicate opportunity. So
Mm,
I try to use those examples first of all that people would know, but people always tend to think that those are the extreme cases. It's like, what are your odds of becoming a NFL player or something like that? Like it's the same amount of odds, and
right.
it's really not. And it's like these are your everyday life that you really didn't believe we were going to get to this point. Did you think when you were a kid and you were walking around with a Walkman that you were going to have in and you were trying to tape on a cassette player, you were trying to tape the songs without the radio announcer
A
interrupting
hundred
you,
percent.
right? And so you're like trying to make your own mixtape,
Right.
but you can't even. So you're
That's funny.
the thing is like you have to use the examples that are going to resonate with the people. But I don't shy away from the challenge of trying to make somebody into a believer because I feel like there's something that they're doing that they didn't realize that they'd be doing, and they're going to have that aha moment. In fact, I had one scenario and it was perfect scenario. I was training an auction on how to use technology that I had designed specifically for them. And I had gone in, like I said, and I said, what's all the paperwork that you use now? This is how we're going to transform this department, right? And so the manager of the department, they said, well, he's not going to do it. He doesn't even use email. How is he functioning? I didn't understand that. But because he had been there for 30 years, and this is what I was dealing with. You had people who had been in positions for 30 years and worked their way up to management. So they never had to know anything about technology because it wasn't an aspect of the job. So they said, well, Mike's never going to do this. And I said, well, you know what? Then I'm building it for Mike. And so
Mm,
they counted Mike out. I didn't count Mike out. So I said, so I came in on a Saturday. I brought the rest of the team in there and Mike's standing behind me and he's on an iPad. I'm walking them through the process that they normally do on paper. And I have the paper there as the guide. See how you do this here? We're doing this here. So then next thing I know, I get a tap on my shoulder and he's asking me a question. I look back and there's Mike doing everything we're doing. The next day I come into their department and I look up on their board because we had these live monitors up on the wall. And I noticed all the work was done. Like there wasn't anything up on the screen because somebody had cleared it. And I was like, good job, girls. You guys did it. You cleared it. And they go, actually, he did it. And they pointed at Mike. And I was just like, yes. So I look at those situations as opportunities because if you can get the least common denominator, on
right.
board with what you're doing, then you're gonna win across the board.
Right. Right. And it's interesting because we talk a lot about AI and we talk about how it's changing it. And one of the things we had talked about with CIO, he said, the problem isn't so much, the younger people, they'll adopt technology, but as the older people leave the market and retire, then they're taking with it all that institutional knowledge and how things work. And, there are things that we do around, QAing technology or, debugging code. Everybody's expecting AI is going to do all that. And in some cases it will, but in some cases it won't. And we're not training the next group of people to handle that adversity, right? Like we've all been through those late night code sessions or that implementation that just was hours and it went the wrong way. And now you got to figure out how to fix it and how to get everybody on board, or you got to regression everything and go back to paper, right?
Yeah.
And there are people who just don't understand how that whole thing works. And so it's interesting when you have a guy like Mike, who is the guy who is, if the whole computer system went down tomorrow, is the guy who's going to pick up a piece of paper and be like, okay, I know how to write this order. 15 years from now, there will be no Mike. right? There'll be nobody who ever knew how to take that order on paper. And it's interesting, this kind of world we're living in, because we're, kind of like the rotary phone and everything. We're almost living in these two worlds where that whole world is going to disappear in, maybe 10 years. And
Yeah, and I
it'd be
mean, it's
interesting to
important.
see what it looks like.
Yeah, and I always think that too, like I love to know what's under the hood. And so when I'm working with other developers and stuff, it's like, yeah, details matter. And that's one of the big things, especially when you're troubleshooting and things like that. And a lot of people just want to get past that and they don't want, you know, I hear a lot, tell me at a, 40,000 foot level. Don't tell me all the, and I'm like, you have no idea how valuable those minor details are though, because, and I need them, in order to do what I do. But yeah, you're right. We're not going to have people who know what's under the hood, how to fix what's under the hood. And that's
Right.
why I say redirect your purpose. If you're somebody who's in sales and sales technology comes out that you're using, be the first one to embrace it. Be the first one
Right.
to wrap yourself around how every aspect of that works and how you're going to innovate your industry. Because if jobs are lost, it's because people aren't keeping up on that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
companies are gonna have to make the hard decisions. Like, yeah, you have 20 years in this industry, and it's not an age discrimination thing, it's you failed to evolve. If you're
Right.
not going to evolve, you're not gonna have the opportunity. So you need to know how to do whatever you do on every level that it needs to be done. So if that's a face-to-face level, if that's a data entry level on how this system works to process your orders or to process your workflow. But I mean, I can't imagine the person who wants to sit there and push 10 buttons when they can push one. I just, to me, that's like, because I do it myself, like whenever I can create efficiency in my team and give them something, I love to do that. Like today I was doing a bunch of things where I was like, man, I remember when this took me a day and now I'm just like clicking a
Right.
couple buttons and it's done.
Right.
So I mean, I get to see it up close and personal all the time. And, some people are just, like I said, they feel like they're walking out onto a cliff and,
Yeah.
they're not going to know what to do tomorrow when they have to apply this. And it depends on how urgent your job, the urgency at your job. Like if are in a busy place and now you've got to add technology to the madness. And then you're just you've just forgot everything you were trained on yesterday. And, I could just see those type of scenarios. But that's why the hand holding is important and, the
Yeah.
little cheat sheets and there's ways to get them there, but you just got to figure out what they respond to. And different people, it's different things. So,
Well, it's interesting because you talk about, we'd refer to it as the ride along, like sit along with people and do the job with them or watch them do the job. Because what I always say to people is, you ask people what they do and I do X, Y, and Z, and this paperwork goes there, this paperwork goes there. Then you build the system and they're like, well, how come you didn't build for this process? Well, I didn't know about that. Well, that only happens on Tuesdays when it rains. Okay, but you didn't tell me that. But if you sat there and it was raining that Tuesday, or you would have enough wherewithal to be like, okay, so that's the only time this happens. But if you don't see them doing it, it's almost like you accept their word for how it works.
yeah.
And technology, I mean, I think AI has changed it a lot, but technology is fickle, right? You're going to code it to what you told me. And when it's that binary and there's a left-hand turn, the system doesn't know that.
Yeah, when all the stars align, this is how it works. But
Right.
then you have the people who will challenge everything that never happens. That's not a process. They go out of order of a process and see if they can break your technology so
Right.
that they can cause some type of scenario that you're like, okay, let me make it completely foolproof. You will never do that in your life, but,
Right.
and you never have, but I'm going to put in this protector so that you can't break this, and
Right.
and that I'll find myself doing that. But there are people who will challenge me. They will, they want to challenge. And then there's people who are just like, show me what to do and how, and, they're just very good about taking it and doing that. And I try to be there because the other side of that too is, like I said, when you have people that are in time sensitive jobs and that technology has to work, I make sure I'm available for them. They know, text me. If something's broken because I messed up, like I didn't do something in the code, I need to fix that right away because the last thing I want is to impede your job. And so they know that about me, and I think that the track record that I've built for being there for them and hand holding and all of that has helped me to, first of all, leave my job and actually have customers when I left, because they're like, they actually would say to me, "We don't even know what you do, but we support you, so sign us up," and it was so funny because I remember how scary that was to say, "I'm just gonna," I went off on that cliff and I said, "Okay, I'm just gonna start doing this." And when I look at how archaic it was from when I started to what we've evolved to, I'm like, "What was I thinking?" Like,
Right.
I didn't have the tools that I have today. There were a lot of long drawn out processes that definitely could not have scaled back then.
Right.
So,
Yeah. But it's
yeah.
every iteration is better and faster. And now we don't know what's coming, but it's okay, what's next and what can I do next?
Yeah, but it helps you stronger in your message because this is what you're selling people on. And so it's a cool story to be able to tell people, I went through this. We went through this as a company, and I guarantee you that you're going to be able to get to the other side of this and be able to, live the dream and be able to do things, all the things unless you're happy with the things you're complaining about. If complaining is your thing and that's what you want to do, I don't want to take that from you, but we do
Right.
need to evolve, and that's the thing. You have some people who are like, they have they have a problem for every solution, right? And you're just like, but those people, again, they're part of my gauge. It's like, how do I make this person happy? This person's easy to make happy. This person, I want to get at least this far on that scale. So
What do you tell your daughter? So you've got a college kid as well. What's the advice that you give her? I love a lot of the nuggets that you've given us. The world doesn't need your permission to change. Always be learning, always be looking forward. Try every new technology that's coming up. What's the advice that you give your daughter?
the advice I give my daughter, so she's a teenager, so you can't give them a whole lot of advice,
Well, that's a
but
fair point.
you
But
can
yeah,
give
she
them
will
the,
be
well,
quickly coming into a professional environment.
yeah. No, you know what? And she amazes me because I learn just as much from her when I watch her do things. There's just something about watching somebody else figure it out who's like kind of brand new, right? Because these are brand new people we're raising and they're determined to have their independence and to figure things out. Once in a while, they'll snag something that you threw at them, and then, it's hard to get them to admit, I got that from you. My daughter's actually getting better about that. I think the older she gets, she's getting more mature about that. It's that 16, 13 to 16-year-old that doesn't want to admit that. But I try to teach her about leadership and taking opportunities, even if it's something she thinks she can't do. I don't care. If you think you can't do it, take the opportunity, figure it out later, because don't miss those type of opportunities. Fear can mean two things. And this is what I tell her. It can mean forget everything and run, or you can face everything and rise. So when
Oh,
worst
yeah.
comes to worst, you have to be willing to do it afraid. Entrepreneurs, just as a general rule, are always jumping off cliffs. So you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's one of the biggest attributes I think that leaders have, and why how they differentiate themselves, for whether it's to get a promotion, whether it's, if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to succeed, and they say there's 1% of people that can do this or that, and you have to be that 1% who's willing to, and not listen to what everybody else is saying. Even if if you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you don't have to have your own business to be an entrepreneur. Whenever I've worked for somebody else, I know, right, what's going to differentiate me, what's going to make me stand out. And for me, it was, what opportunities are hidden in here? Where are these Easter eggs of opportunities that I can find, bring to the surface and elevate that? And for me, at the auction business, it was the technology, because it was not being used to the extent that it should have been. And we were running pretty inefficiently. I just saw some inefficiencies that I'm like, do you mean to tell me they don't have something in that program that doesn't help you do, so you have to question everything. but be willing to find the solutions. Don't be the person who brings the problems to the table. Be the person who has the questions. Be curious constantly. Don't know everything. If you know everything, you stop learning anything that could have gotten you to the next stage. So that's just, I think my mind is just kind of geared that way. And so that's what made me become an entrepreneur when I was going to be a cop. Like,
I'd say
you
you have
know?
some very lucky clients for
Right.
sure.
Well, I'm definitely, I feel extremely blessed and lucky that, it doesn't always pan out when when you jump off that cliff, but I think the commitment level has to be strong. I think when you decide you're going to skip and you have to skip a lot of things and make the sacrifices and do all that. And I think a lot of people who think they're going to go into business for themselves, I think they think they're going to make their own schedule. There's all these things that they believe business ownership is about. And you guys know
Yes.
it sure is not.
No,
It
you are
is
not
not.
in charge any longer.
No.
No.
Well, this has been so much fun, Kelly. I'm so
Yeah,
glad that you joined us. I'm so glad that when we were
absolutely.
sitting in Florida with our daughters, that I was venting and you were like, I know exactly what you're talking about. So that was really just a fantastic strike of luck
Yeah.
for us. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah. We
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
for
Yeah.
having me. It was fun, you guys.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Good. Excellent.
Like, right?
1, 2,